I'm joined by Revenue Minister Simon Watts. I mean, what for you are the important features of the changes that you're going to bring in?
Yeah, so this tax bill reflects a number of aspects, interest deductibility and the ability for that to be claimed by landlords is coming in. We've got other aspects in regards to a variety of things, the gambling tax loopholes being closed, and we're looking forward to getting those through.
I mean, there's obviously been questions about where the money comes from and how it matches up. For instance, obviously the cost of interest deductibility against some of the revenue collecting elsewhere, but then of course the proposals that both the Prime Minister and Finance Minister have confirmed will happen in the budget, tax threshold changes. I mean, are you going to be able to balance, if you like, the tax revenue from all of these changes?
Yeah, look, absolutely. The reality is, in terms of closing the gap that we have, will require a variety of both revenue side adjustments and cost saving side adjustments. The Minister of Finance has been clear on that, and all the ministers are working on that. But from a revenue side, the key objective for me is to ensure that we've got the appropriate modelling undertaken in regards to the taxes that we're putting through, and that's what we've done. And in regards to the gambling tax aspect, there is a element around the revenue flows that will flow from regulation. They are a proxy because we don't know all of the participants, particularly those in the hidden economy offshore that are there. But we know that when we put regulation in place, that net will get bigger. And we expect to get more players into the tax.
So that's revenue on top of the tax that you're putting.
That's
in place.
right. So the Inland Revenue can only use forecasts based on their proxies, which is basically those that are compliant with who pay GST at the moment. Yeah. But we do know, as you can imagine, in an offshore gambling market, there's a lot of participants that aren't compliant.
But how do you track them all down?
Well, the reality is when we put in place a compliance mechanism, and we've seen this in other jurisdictions as well, so there's a lot of good proxy from other OECD countries of once you put the regulation in place, then it makes it very difficult for those other participants to be able to operate, and therefore you see a movement in terms of the overall spend back to those that are actually compliant and within the system.
We had the IMF here recently, and obviously they keep on repeating essentially the same sort of recommendations around how they think the tax system should be changed and a switch to, I guess, tax and capital gain a bit more, land value tax, but then while you do that, cuts to company tax rates. And to be honest, they raised their eyebrows about interest deductibility for landlords while at the same time you're removing the depreciation deductibility for building and industrial building owners, commercial building. Do you see any validity in the argument around how tax can help promote greater productivity?
So absolutely, and that's a conversation that we have been heavily focused on. One of my objectives is around primarily how do we reduce the tax burden and the compliance cost on taxpayers. That's a productivity enhancement if we can get that right. And how do we increase enforcement for those that are currently cheating the system to ensure that we've got the integrity in place. The elements around making sure that the broader system has revenue sufficiency for the amount of government expenditure is something that we're continually assessing. Our focus right now is on dealing with, and as the IMF also highlighted, getting government expenditure under control and reducing that waste. And that's a key element of the coalition government focus. But on the side, we're obviously continuing to monitor the revenue flows and primarily looking at how do we drive greater efficiency within the system. There's quite a lot of volatility in the tax system through new taxes potentially coming in and out over the past period. I've been very clear with the department. This is a period for us to provide certainty to the market, clarity around what we're going to do and what we're not going to do, and actually a chance to consolidate and make sure that the tax legislation we're putting through is actually well thought out and considered, because we had a lot of critique around the prior, where we were around tax legislation being rushed and therefore a lot of mistakes. So a return back to the generic tax policy process, which was very much part and parcel, nearly a decade ago. Getting back to some of those basics has been a direction from me to the department.
But I'm just wondering if in the history that there's just too much tinkering with tax rather than over. I mean, and we've had now, I can't remember how many tax reviews we've had in the last 15 years or so, where a series of recommendations have been made, and governments of all persuasions, have kind of cherry-picked a bit out of it, but we've never seemed to have had that fundamental reform of tax. Do you think that the system needs a really good look at?
The conversations that I've been having with the department is, we've had, exactly to your point, a huge number of recommendations around how to enhance and make our system more efficient, but yet those haven't been implemented. So the opportunity that we have now in that terms of consolidation is through the remedial bills that we put through, to put through some of those changes that drive greater efficiency within the system, which drive greater productivity. And I've directed my officials to be looking at a number of those recommendations in the past, which will drive greater efficiency within the system, and I'm expecting to see that flow through both in the August bill, which we are drafting at the moment, and anything else that we need to do in the following year. FBT is a good example of that. It's an area that's raised a lot in terms of concerns, and I want to see clear surgical changes in the bill coming up in August and more substantive changes next year.
But critics argue, I think the IMF argues, for instance, that there is still the tax system skewed towards promoting investment into residential housing, investment housing, rather than into more productive assets. Do you accept that?
Look, our objective as coalition government is to grow the economy, to increase exports, to drive greater efficiency and productivity within our economy. Our view is that the overall low-based, broad-based tax system that we have is sufficient for our needs at this point. Are we assessing and continually looking at that revenue sufficiency in terms of what we know? The population's getting older, other considerations we need to think out, a decade, 2 decades from now. But at the moment, our priority is to get the government expenditure under control and ensure that the revenue system is as efficient as it can be.
But if you look at, say, comprehensive capital gains tax, and because we do have capital gains taxes as it is, but if you look at a comprehensive one, doesn't that allow you to broaden the base and mean that you can lower taxes overall? I mean, if you can lower company tax rate, maybe it helps you lower personal income tax rates more, which I guess is an incentive to work, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we see the priority, as I said, in areas to grow the economy. The increase in foreign investment is an area that the IRD did in their long-term insights report that they reported in 2022. Yet the recommendations from that report haven't flowed through in terms of tangible actions. That's where I want the effort to be focused on at the moment, to drive greater efficiency in the overall system, to drive better productivity for our economy. The conversations around more taxes is actually part of the volatility and lack of certainty that the market signalled that they did not want to have more of. We need a period of consolidation to actually tune the engine of the tax system so that it's operating efficiently and make sure people aren't cheating the system, and we know they are. Tax debt's gone up significantly, and there's a number of factors for that. But every dollar that I have of tax debt that isn't collected is a dollar that I have to borrow, or we have to not fund their essential services, and that's a real reality challenge, and so hence why I'm asking the department to really focus on that.
I mean, in terms of raising the income tax thresholds, I guess, which people keep on referring to as a tax cut, but we can argue that it's not necessarily a tax cut per se. But obviously, before the election, the National kind of campaigned on it as part of the cost of living response. But I'm wondering whether you saw any irony in the fact that the Taxation Principles Reporting Act, which has been repealed, but that draft report actually made a very strong reference to the thresholds and sort of talked about if you don't lift thresholds, then you lose your tax system becomes less progressive and it flattens it. I mean, do you see an argument around, fairness that there should be kind of regular lifts and thresholds so that people on relatively low incomes don't keep on being caught by higher marginal tax rates?
Yeah, I think the conceptual model that the thresholds should be aligned with, and readjusted on a periodic basis, it conceptually, makes sense, and we've signalled that previously in regards to, our intent. The reality then flow through is the fiscal situation and the ability to be able to actually affect that change based on the trade-offs of other priorities within the broader economy. And so we've been committed, consistently around the fact that we want to and will change the threshold elements in order to provide relief to middle New Zealand. We want that to be targeted, and that's what we'll do. And then the conversations around reassessing that will come in the future once we get the economy back under control and ensure that that economy is stable and in a growth phase. We're in a recession at the moment, and therefore that our main focus, our main effort, is to deal with that recession and get us back up onto our foils.
Simon Watts, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
To support our award-winning independent journalism, subscribe to nbr.co.nz.